To be called selfish, to be considered self-centered.
Like, it actually cannot be named that. Like, I don't want to be associated with the word selfish in any context.
Girl, selfish is not a bad word. It is about self-respect. It is about what we want. It is about self-care. It is about self-love, self-fulfillment. Welcome to the Self-ish Latina podcast, where we get to be self-ish together.
Okay, are we ready?
You're so awesome. All right, so here we go. I had heard about Lorraine early on. I knew she was a supporter, and she's just a bright light. She's among so many influencers. There's an attractive quality about this woman that I can't put into words. And now after getting to know her in the podcast, I see why. It's because she owns so much of her power in the telling of her life story. Lorraine is living proof that it is never too late to redesign your life exactly the way that you want it. She has a very successful blog called Viva50.com, a YouTube channel. She has a phenomenal relationship with her husband, and she's also the matriarch of a beautiful blended family.
Well, I got to where I am today through a series of unfortunate events. But it seems like that's the best way to get somewhere. It's, I don't even know where I would start. It's, I do come from a family of writers, so that's where my writing streak comes from. My grandfather and my father are from Spain. My mother is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Interesting.
And my dad came here when he was 16 because Spain after the Civil War was a mess and he needed to get away. So he bought himself a one-way ticket to Pittsburgh because his uncle was there. And he studied and got his degree, married my mom, and that's how I became bicultural and bilingual, and also a person who didn't feel she fit in the States or in Spain. In Spain, I'm not Spanish enough. In the States, I'm not American enough. And with Latinos, it depends who I'm with. They might not consider me Latina enough. So
wow.
It's all this, it's a big, but now I understand it's been a big journey. I developed this very severe eating disorder when I was very young. And I also grew up with clinical depression and anxiety. But all of this was what my first book was built upon. Mm-hmm. And it was all that angst and all that suffering. My first book, when I was 29, I thought to myself, I really want to do something that I am proud of. And I wanted to be writing and publishing a book, and I did.
So even though in the first 2 minutes of my interview with Lorraine, she powerfully shares so authentically about her struggle with bulimia. I mean, I'm talking to a woman who is a master at sharing and telling her story, and someone who made me feel extremely comfortable immediately because of her ability to share her story. Like, we should all be taking notes from Lorraine about how to describe our truth, because she does it in a way that's like, it's like just so like matter of fact and like and with so much power. Like, you can just tell this woman has done the work. She has reconciled what needs to be reconciled, and she's, I think, probably very present to the fact that the more she shares, the more power she has, and also the more impact it has.
And I thought to myself, I really want to do something that I am proud of. And I wanted to be writing and publishing a book, and I did. Against all odds, without knowing anything about the publishing world, without having an agent, I did it. Mm-hmm. And it was the story of my eating disorder.
Wow.
I had not overcome it yet at the age of 30, so going on TV and being a spokesperson for this actually got me back into a huge relapse and more depression. So all my books have more or less covered all the trials and tribulations I've gone through, from marriage mistakes to, cool stuff too, like being pregnant and raising your kids and writing and publishing and a few novels. But I've always made a living with words. Uh-huh. And so when I came to the States with my now ex-husband, I was raising the girls, and I was very unhappy. I was raising my kids, but he lost his job. So I found myself pounding the streets, like the pavement, and I very quickly found a job as a reporter, something I had never done.
Wow.
With the Palm Beach Post.
How does that happen? Who
They
finds themselves
took
as
a bet on
reporter?
me. I was already in my 40s. They knew that I was a writer. They had interviewed me as an author, and I told her to give me a chance. And the editor was way younger than I was, and she did. She coached me, and I worked with them for 4 years.
Wow.
Until the recession. And not only that, I worked for them remotely eventually because my husband got a different job in a different part of Florida. And I told my editor, the bad news is I'm moving away. The good news is if you give me a chance, I'll prove to you that I can do this remotely. And that was in the day when the internet, social media wasn't even a thing. And I had to find people to interview, and using my crazy, I never see the obstacles. I see as how can I get through this? So again, I was able to do that. But then the recession happened, and my marriage was not doing well. And we had been through years of therapy and trying to make it work. So my husband was out of work again. I didn't have sources of income. I lost absolutely everything. And I couldn't imagine having to be with this person that, it just wasn't jiving. And so I thought, I need to start over. And I did. I was 45. I walked out with nothing but my girls and my books and my computer. And eventually I had to sell all my family's jewelry, like gold, all the heirlooms that my family had, which for me, when you're living away from your family, that is almost like their legacy.
Yeah.
But then during that time, a lot of things happened where I kept dancing. For example, I went to the studio, and a young guy who was an entrepreneur, he said, I've seen on Facebook was already around, and he said, I see that you're a writer. And I said, yeah, I've written all these books, right? And I thought he was going to give me some good gig. And his gig was that he had a website where he did these coupon, like they have coupons for this or for that. Uh-huh. So he said, if you write a few blog posts, I can pay you like 10 or $12 per post. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what that is. And he said, but they have to be SEO friendly. I didn't even know what SEO meant. But you know what? I took the gig. I was making money writing whatever. It was coupons. My name wasn't on the piece, thank goodness. But it was like, wow, I'm writing again. I'm making money doing this. And that was, to make a long story honestly short, is that was the beginning of me taking my entire writing career online and now making a full-time living with it, writing online with my husband. I remarried, the love of my life, quite honestly. Uh-huh. We've been together for soon 9 years. Oh. And we both work together. He's also a writer, a novelist with numerous awards. And we've done this journey together, created a blended family. And when I turned 50, I launched Viva50.com because at 50, I had relaunched my career, met the love of my life. I was remarrying. I felt physically and emotionally better than ever. Mm-hmm. And I thought other women felt the same, and they did not. I didn't even realize. I was going through so much in my 40s. I didn't know that you had to have like a midlife crisis.
That's just so funny. I think, so the thing that's interesting and that what stands out for me is when I heard that she sold her family's jewelry, because that was like the keepsakes of the family. They hold the stories of the family. They're like metaphors of their own, in their own right, and things that you pass on, and how bummed out she was. And, we're in the same club. We both sold jewelry. At first it was very hard to tell people that Kevin and I had sold our wedding rings. One of my biggest fears, like the thing that I avoid the most, is feeling embarrassed. And so embarrassed is a feeling I just don't ever want to feel. So why would I ever share this thing that I'm embarrassed about in the film? And so then I did. And here's how we handle it in the film. And I'm so glad we did, because it just busts open a door for so many people about what's okay and what's not okay to share. So the bottom line is, I drove a Mercedes, and I just loved that car. And then we couldn't afford it anymore. It's part of a greater story of underestimating how much time and money and effort would go into doing this. The rent was due, and it just didn't look like we were going to be able to pay it. And what could we sell that we could get some cash right now? And I thought if we sold these wedding rings, we probably could make that payment. It just broke my heart, and it just made me feel like this is not how I thought it was going to go, you know? And I'm like, we're there with our children, and it was very embarrassing. It was really hard. So many people have come up to me after the film saying, thanks for selling your wedding rings so that I could feel like I wasn't alone. Thanks for making the sacrifice, right? And being willing to deal with the embarrassment. God, that fucking embarrassment comes up all the time now. It's okay to let go of the material possessions. It's okay to have that be a part of your story. It's okay to like tell people the truth about that. And also the sadness that's behind that. I don't have the ring that Kevin proposed to me, but it's the truth and it's part of my story. And I don't, the funny thing that I say, but that also happens to be true, is that my marriage has never been better since we sold our wedding rings. Time after time after time of screening the film, someone would come up to me and say that they too had sold something in a moment of need. And I realized there wasn't really anything to be embarrassed about. And if anything, sharing that which I felt embarrassed about freed other people up to not be embarrassed.
When I started publishing online that, I'm turning 50, and everybody's like, are you sure you want to tell people that? And I'm like, I do.
Wow.
So then I was running one day and I thought, what is this site I'm going to be launching? And I was like, Latina Prime, this. And I'm like, no, the word Latina can't be in there because it's, no, but I want two languages. And I was like, Viva 50.
Wow.
So bilingual, bicultural. And now the best thing is that it's not only women over 50 that follow me, it's younger women too, because they tell me, thanks to you, I am no longer afraid of aging.
Oh.
So people people in their 30s are afraid of getting old. And so my latest book with HarperCollins, which is only in Spanish right now, Tu Mejor Edad, is actually geared to women 35 and onwards, because I realized that I might not have had crisis in my age because I was busy doing so much stuff, but other people do.
Right.
And so I wanted to talk to those people and say, you're not too old at 35, you're not too old at 40, you're not too old at 50, and certainly not, and then with these good genes that my dad and my grandma have given me, if I live as long as she's living, I'm only in midlife starting it.
Wow. Well, I was going to say, I think I know the reason why you have such a young demo is because they're like, if that's what 50 looks like, I'll take 2. I'll take 3. Thank you very much. I don't
know, but it's like, it's the thing is that, I'm not saying and we've been talking about this a little bit before, there are things about getting older that are not a lot of fun, but we have to celebrate getting older because there is no other way around it. You can kick and scream and cry and do whatever. You're still going to get older.
Right. Right.
So do it with flair.
Right. I would say you are doing it with flair, and you're very inspiring.
Thank you.
I read your post yesterday. Sometimes when you just feel like you see things at the time you're supposed to see them. And when I read your post, I was so inspired and so it was one of those things where I felt like, wow, she's talking to me. Like, I need to read this. I need to know this. And it was like, no one has power over me if I own my story. And I was like, that just hit me like a ton of bricks, because I have a TED Talk that's about to come out. And I revealed something.
I want to see it.
Yeah, and I revealed something. I'll show it to you, and I'll tell you what it's about. Not in this interview though, because I'm still afraid.
Yeah,
funny.
Of course.
So I revealed something that I literally left out of the movie. I left the film being Eñye is my life story, but I left a really big piece of it out, and because I felt like if people knew, they would have power over me. I literally believe that lie. I'm not even ready to tell you right now. It still bugs me. It's still hard for me.
So what are we talking about here?
Well, so we're talking about a sexual assault that happened when I was in college. And I think sometimes, well, there are some things that are packed away so long ago and so well, like packed away so well, like lock the door and hide the key well. I never ever thought in a million years I'd ever have cause to revive that. I never thought I'd have a cause to revive that moment in the spirit of helping anybody else or helping myself, frankly. But I did, because something between then and now has happened, which is the Me Too movement, and I decided to use a TED Talk invitation as a platform to share that. And then another phenomena happened as well, which was, for whatever reason, even though I hadn't shared about the sexual assault, people still divulged really, really, really deep, dark secrets to me after the film. There was some element to the first film that gave people a gift, and it was impossible to ignore that sharing gave people something, that being honest about something, about my truth, was also a gift to other people. And since the Me Too movement happened, how could I don't know. I know I could have easily not said anything.
Pushing through that resistance.
So I just admire anyone that's willing to talk about something that's extremely hard. And she really embodies that. Share about this, about the stuff I did leave in, and yet I read your post and almost started crying yesterday because I was like, man, she's right. Like, when we own all of it, then no one has power. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Tell me what inspired you to post that, and just anything you want to share about it.
Yes, of course. It was, and I remember how I closed it. It was, you will always win. And by you, I mean you, all of you, being oneself and being an open book. And I'm not talking about dishing out, like a lot of people say, well, is this too much information or whatever. I always say my story ends when somebody else's starts. For example, I will talk about my marriage, or what I suffered through it, up until the point where I'm starting to talk about somebody else's story. My ex's story is his story. It's not mine to tell. I might tell you over a couple of drinks, and I'm not going to put it out there for everybody to see, because I'm very respectful of that. But what I've noticed, and I felt this really strongly the other night, it was like, I see so many people who I know their struggle. I know what their inside story is. And yet I see them like, oh, no, let's not show everybody that, we're struggling with money, or that the kid got into drugs, or that whatever happened, or that I'm taking medication, or whatever, because they don't want everybody else to know. And I was feeling that must be so time and energy consuming, and they have to be scared. But some people I know in person, and some are exes, and I'm thinking, they can never say anything about me, because whatever they say, I already have told people. And even if there was something that is a private situation, it says more about the other person talking about it than about me. So this is where I realized, like, I've always kind of been like that. Like, I remember telling my first husband that I had an eating disorder. I said, I have an eating disorder. And he says, no, you don't. You had an eating disorder. I said, no. Like, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I have an eating disorder. Whether now it's, I'm doing better with it or whatever. But I've always been upfront. Like, with my current husband, he knew everything. Like, I take meds, this, because otherwise, how can I have a real relationship if I'm not showing who I am? Now, the issue is whether is the other person ready to accept you that way? Because, for example, my ex-husband was not. And he kept saying that, no, you're not like this, you're not like that. And then I thought, you know what? I don't care if people know if I take them. Now that my kids found out, because I was kind of not hiding it from them, but I didn't want them to grow up with this feeling of their mom is a certain way. And the reason they found that I take medication for depression is that they saw my ID bracelet. When I go running, I wear something in case I pass out or whatever, and so they know who to call, and what smart medication I take.
That's so smart.
But I hadn't taken off my bracelet, and my youngest, who's now almost 14, read it at the dinner table, and she's like, Lexapro? And they know it from songs. She's like, Lexapro, Clonopin. Mommy, what is this? And I said, I take these medications. She's like, you do? And then my other daughter said, is it because of me? Because my eldest has given me a few gray hairs in the past few years. And I said, no, honey, it's not because of you. It's because of me. It's because mommy was born with, because this is the truth. I do have this chemical imbalance. Some people have it, and I learned to make peace with it. Other people might not be okay with it, but I am. And the person who has to be okay with that is me. I've always been kind of cursed and blessed with extreme self-awareness from a very young age. I don't know why. And when I was very young and I was 17 and dealing with depression and an eating disorder, I was trying to find solutions where my family was looking the other way because they didn't know what to do. And I read self-help books. I read Wayne Dyer's books when I was 16. I took myself to a therapist in espaldas from my family because they didn't believe in that. So this is like a very, but it can also be very scary to be like that because a self-awareness when the stuff you're self-aware of is not good or not perceived as good by others is a scary journey. But now that I've been through it and so much, I just realized, my sister is a survivor of a suicide attempt. And the reason I can tell you is because she's written about it. She has put it out there. She's blogged about it. She's been interviewed about it. And I respect her so much for having put it out there. And to me, she's a survivor and she is my role model. And the fact that she openly talks about it is like, not everybody has
No, that is very courageous. That is very courageous. I think it runs in your family. You guys must have like the courage DNA, like in spades.
No, not really, because there's I think it's on the contrary that we grew up in an environment where it was all about, well, let's not talk about this, let's not talk about that. That was like, well, it's me. Let me talk about me. And when I published my first book, a lot of what my family read in the book, and things they found out about me and my eating disorder and my depression, they found out by reading the book.
Wow.
And I did have reactions then from friends who were like, you never told me this. I'm like, of course I didn't tell you. That's the whole point. It's an addiction. Nobody's proud. And for some reason, like alcohol and drugs and all that seems to be a little more like people kind of, not that they get it, it's difficult to grasp, but people kind of, but being addicted to food is not glamorous, and it's not, it's embarrassing to have to admit that. And not only that, it's something you deal with every day. So to recover from that, like you can quit alcohol, you can quit drugs, but you can't quit eating.
Whoa, I never thought about that.
Yeah, because anorexia is like when you stop eating completely, but then you have to start, eating too. Mine was the opposite. It was that I would purge, I would binge and eat myself sick, and then, but it was like a drug. It was the same way as a drug. It's like the same stealing money, the same lying, the same hiding, the same throwing up in public bathrooms, the same. It's a two lives. You're leading a normal life where everybody sees you, and an addict life. So when my family read that, they were like, we had no clue it was that bad. So, it was, and that was like the beginning of my accepting who I was and being okay with telling people, because far from people were hurt that I hadn't gone to them for help. That was what friends kind of threw in my face. But I had to explain to them and say, well, it's a disease. You can't ask for help. Right. That's the problem. And then, so basically that was that, but nobody said to me, why did you do this? What one person did tell me is like, thank you for writing this because I always thought you were too perfect.
No kidding. Wow.
So they actually respected me for sharing that story and not telling it in a way of I'm a victim. It was more in a way of, well, this is my struggle. I know you're out there struggling like me, or you might have a daughter struggling like that. But then what happened afterwards is that I wanted to continue being a writer, and I did not want to be the bulimic who wrote a book. I wanted to be the writer who happened to be bulimic and wrote a book about it, but then wrote a gazillion other books, and I did. One thing that I realized I do is I tend to focus on, I guess I forget the really bad things. I don't entirely forget them, but I kind of archive them because I can pull them if I need to write about something or whatever. I know I can draw from awful feelings, but I on the surface, on the outside, what's bubbling out there is always the more positive part.
Yeah, I totally feel you. And that's interesting. Now that I know all of the stuff about you, I understand why I feel a kinship with you, because I too am able to compartmentalize. I think when a lot of tragedy it has happened, the only way to function and still be a contributing member of society and have any semblance of a normal life is to be able to be expert at compartmentalizing. And so I can tell that you do that, but then also you recognize that the source of joy is where you want to live. Like, your emotional home needs to be in joy, and that's what I feel from you. And so another question about releasing the book: do you feel like that, because it sounded like people said I had no idea. I had a very similar reaction from people that I knew. Did it help your family to heal a little bit, to hear the truth about your experience?
No. But you know what? I think it's like we're, oh goodness. I suppose every family has its things, right? But first of all, I was, like, my parents' divorce was traumatic. And then my mother had a stroke 4 years afterwards at 28. And my dad remarried, and then there's that relationship. Sure. And then more, I mean, it's like my grandfather used to cheat on my grandmother. There was like all this big thing where I always thought it's my fault. And then one day I left and I realized it was not my fault because I could work on myself, but I couldn't fix other people's lives. So as much as it pains me, what I have learned to do, and especially now that I'm a mom and my kids are teens and all that, is that my time, my energy, and my everything is for them. I cannot go and fix the past. I love my family dearly, but I have come to realize I cannot fix anybody else.
Self-awareness is a scary journey, and it's a worthwhile journey. When we talk about selfish, this is exactly what we're talking about. It's not easy work to wonder why you are the way you are and try to put the pieces and parts of your life together in a way that makes sense to you, and to reconcile the painful parts and to forgive and move on. And when we say selfish, this is the work we're talking about. Listening to Lorraine speak so powerfully about her life is the end result of that high level of introspection. And it's what's possible when we take the time to be selfish.
One of the things you were talking about was like self-care, and I feel like you kind of embody that. And
I do.
You talked about mental health and growing up and like nobody even knowing what bulimia was. And then even if they knew, I kind of feel like your family wouldn't have even been supportive of you to get help for that, which they might have already heard of before. And I kind of feel like what I'm seeing and witnessing is a lot of really strong, educated, powerful Latinas are grappling with this force, from our culture that says your family is first, meaning you're not, right? And then we have all these educated, smart, Latinas that are just like powerhouses, like the women that you and I kind of are running around we're all running around in each other's orbits, right? And I'm hearing this kind of murmur. I'm feeling this struggle and experiencing it myself, of this old culture, this old cultural ideal, and then this new hope for like the children of immigrants, right? They came here so they could give us a better life and we could be educated and independent. But then that clashes when we have children and when we're married and when we want to put ourselves first, and we're seeing our counterparts, non-Latina counterparts, putting themselves first. And I see there's like a struggle, and I feel like you're winning there. And I'd love for you to tell us like how you're doing it.
Well, I it's funny because when I go to these seminars where they're like, oh, when was the last time you had a massage? I'm like, yesterday? When was the last time you napped? Today? So I really am, and sometimes, at the expense of people making fun of it, family members, or even my late ex-father-in-law. I remember that I had the 2 babies. I hadn't slept. He was home, and I said, "Would you please take care of the baby? I need to go get a massage." And he made me feel. He tried to make me feel guilty, and he did make me feel guilty. But guess what? I went and got my massage anyway.
Good for you.
So to women who I sleep naps. The other day, my daughter needed my attention, and I said, "Okay, I understand what you're going through." It wasn't something that was super urgent. I could tell from her voice and everything. I said, "Okay, mommy needs to go sleep," because I had to get on the road for 4 hours afterwards and drive them somewhere. So I'm like, I'm going to take care of myself, because otherwise we're going to have a car crash. I want to sleep, and then we can discuss in the car. Exactly, that's what happened. So I tell my kids, and I don't know why this has happened, possibly a survival instinct. There was also a woman in my life when I was very young, was not my mother or my grandmother, and she gave me vouchers for massages and to take care of my face and do this. And she always said, "Take care of yourself, take care of yourself." So I always think of the day that I'm not around, I want those words to resonate with my daughters. So I keep telling them, you first. You first, before your kids, before, if you ever have kids, you first. And they see me do it. So like my yoga time before it was running, and I injured my hips, so that's why I do yoga now. But whether it's dancing or running or whatever it is that you need to do for your self-care, take your time and do it. It's not indulgent. And I tell the girls this, my daughters, and they see me do it. You want to have your hair done, go get it done, and make the money to have your hair done. If you don't have the money, because I've been there, I've been dirt poor on food stamps, I would do a barter. And maybe there was a hairdresser who was, and I looked great. People would never have thought I was on food stamps.
Wow.
And it wasn't because I was spending tons of money. It was because I had friends who gave services that I could benefit from by doing something in return for them. Maybe they needed a copy for their website. So I learned to do that and be that person who, one of the things that saved me, and I've mentioned this before, and my life was when I was down and out, was going to a dance studio that cost me money. It wasn't a lot, but it was money I didn't have. But that investment in my mental health, because I forgot everything when I was dancing, and I even brought my kids, and they still remember. And they're like, "Mommy, remember when we went to the dance studio and you did this and you did that?" So it's like, sometimes when they were little, they would say, "Mommy, you need to go running." And I was like, "Yes, I do." And actually, I lived in a development where there was here in Florida, we have these closed or gated communities, and there was a lake. And the girls were very young, so I would sit them on the stoop and they would play there, and I would run in circles, whatever it took. So they have grown up seeing me do that. And now they do the same. And even on weekends, they're teenagers, and I don't wake them up early on weekends. I hate getting up early. And if they need to sleep, they need to sleep. Who am I to say that they have to get up and run around and do whatever? I hated it when my dad woke me up at 15. At 9 a.m. to do what? I wanted to be awake at night. So as long as they're not in trouble, they're good kids and all that, I promise you, I already see them being alive when I'm not, and thinking, "Mommy used to say this and that," and I hope they pass it on to their kids too.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I love that. That's remarkable. I'm like a lot struck actually by how your honesty helps me make sense of stuff for myself, and really the gift of telling your story. And that's we are coming to a close on this interview, and I really want to say the power of authenticity is alive and well in you and in this interview. And really, one of the powers I think it has is its ability to allow others to be in touch with their truth, right? So by you sharing your truth, I'm also more in touch with my truth, which makes me feel more powerful in my own skin with my own story. So thank you so much for that. Thanks also for being so candid about your self-care. And really, this interview is going into self-love, because all of my work with Project Eñye, with Embrace Your Latinidad, and with the Eñye Nation, if I had to sum it up into one thing, it would be self-love. And that's really what I believe will deliver everybody out of all of their pain, is kind of awakening to that truth. And once there, I really believe that we have a chance to kind of be a united, united as Latinos, but really united as global citizens, because that is my greatest vision with this work, is that one will see oneself as a global citizen and not the differences, but in fact the similarities. But the only way we can see that is to do the inner work. And so thanks for inspiring me and for inspiring everyone that's watching to do the work, because man, you make it look so effortless and so beautiful. You're just awesome.
It's not effortless by any means. And one of the things that you were saying is, for example, even being, Hispanic, Latina, different, a mutt has colored my life as well. And it was one of the reasons that I had difficulty as a young woman embracing all of me. And one of the things that I love of being a mom of kids that are also a mix, and their dad is also, their grandmother is from Argentina, their grandfather was from Sweden, the dad was, anyway, so we have a whole thing behind us, but they are very, very proud of who they are. And that is, to me, that's a win, because at their age, I was not.
Yeah, I hear you. And what a gift it is to transfer that pride to our, to the young people. And so that's awesome. You really also kind of helped me look at my relationship with my daughters, and I'm like, yeah, I want them to sleep late too, and I want them to do all that stuff too, and embrace their Latina. I just love it all. What advice would you have to give them in their journey of embracing their Latinidad?
Well, it's something that you have said already, which is there's no right or one way to be Latino. There are as many ways as numbers of us there are. But we all have in common one thing, that feeling of not being enough, not being Latino enough, not being American enough, not being from a certain country enough. But in the bottom line is that is what attracts me to other Latinos, is that common denominator of that we do feel a little bit different and that we are citizens of the world. So really to know that they're not alone by any means.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This was great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And
no, thank you.
We should all be taking notes from Lorraine about how to describe our truth. You first is what she's teaching her children. What an incredibly beautiful thing. You first means doing the thing that makes you happy. So whether it's dancing or yoga or running, taking the time for you, that includes haircuts and manicures, meditation, whatever it is, it's the thing that brings you happiness and joy. It's the thing that fills your cup. It is not indulgent to give yourself the gift of that which brings you joy. And if we don't do it, we stay stuck. You're stuck. You believe the lie that you exist to please other people. You derive joy, too much joy, out of people pleasing. And it needs to stop. We need to reset. We need to begin to think about ourselves. We need to begin to prioritize ourselves first. We need to reawaken the woman inside us that needs and thrives off of nurturing herself first. And then we can give to others. I want to thank my guest, Lorraine Ladish, for taking her time today to reveal all of the amazing truth about her life and for inspiring me to get to the next level with my truth. This episode is brought to you by the Eñye Dream Accelerator. EDA is an 8-week coaching program designed for ambitious Latinas who are ready to take action on their biggest dream. Sign up and get on the wait list now. Thanks for joining us on the Self-ish Latina podcast, where we get the chance to be self-ish together.